Welcome. I'm Julian Rogers in the Turks and Caicos. We're here to chat with the Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, none other than the Honorable Washington Mizik. He is the current chairman of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, who are due to hold their governors meeting here in the Turks and Caicos in June. We'll talk to the Premier not only about his role as the leader of the country, but also as that of the President of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, and also the President of the UK Overseas Territory Association. He chairs the rotational position as the political counsel. He's also the Vice President of the Turks and Caicos branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and a representative of the Turks and Caicos Caribbean Heads of Government meetings. Of course, for CARICOM, he's also have that role of building the relationship with regional institutions as well. So, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Welcome you, Turks and Caicos. I'm looking forward to a fantastic time here with the rest of the Caribbean and for the CDB board meeting.
Let's talk first, Premier, about the Turks and Caicos. How have you done?
Turks and Caicos has done extremely well. I mean, in terms of where we are and the recognition of the progress that's been made here, it's all been fairly new. Just about everything you see around here is less than 50 years old. So we're basically can be considered the new kid on the block, if you like. But we have a very successful economy. Tourism obviously is our main industry. In fact, it is sometimes said that Turks and Caicos is probably the most tourism-dependent country in the world next to Macau. And but we've done very well. We have been able to consistently, for the better part of the last 6 years, produce a surplus in our revenue, government revenue, our budgets. We have a BBB plus credit rating. Government have zero debt, and a very hefty reserve, including a sovereign wealth fund. So I think we're doing very well, all things considered. You know.
As you say that, I have to ask you, how did you survive COVID?
A confluence of events or circumstances meant that we pulled through COVID very, very good. We had assistance from the United Kingdom. We got the vaccine early. Our population responded quickly, so we ramped up to about 80% our vaccination rate by the end of the summer of 2021, I think it would be. And then, of course, the fact that we entered the COVID with significant reserve, we were able to really preserve life and livelihood by actually assisting the population through stimulus grants and other assistance. So yeah, we've done very well through COVID.
So having gone through that period, what really are the new priorities here?
Well, you know, there's a word that's overused sometimes called sustainability. And our focus is on building resilience and sustainability. And that involves focusing on ensuring that not only sustainability in terms of the economy, but also in terms of our sensitive environment, which is very much tied to the economy. Everyone in this island and this country makes their living off the natural capital of the economy, so we're very concerned about ensuring that that is preserved, but also keeping us a good social balance. Turks and Caicos depend very, very largely on foreign labor. And so we've got issues of housing and all of those kinds of things that we've got to focus on to ensure that the environment is not degraded and the five-star destination that we are known for is actually maintained. So yes, those are some challenges, but I think we've designed and are designing solutions and approaches to ensure that our economy and our social and environmental sectors are sustainable.
You're fresh from presenting a budget to this country. What would you say are the priority items that you're addressing in this?
You know, a big umbrella issue of my government is human capital development. Okay. Also, another big issue at the moment is price inflation. So what we, and of course the social quality of life issues. So my budget includes a lot of deals with how do we protect the vulnerable. So people are looking for social assistance. We've upped the level of assistance, investing huge amount of money in scholarships, grants, and full scholarships, and investing in education. We just acquired property to put TVAT, expanding or standing up in place a well-functioning hospitality school. So the focus really is on the human capital development, improving the social situation of the public, and also investing heavily in infrastructure, because I believe that wealth is created by the private sector. Government distributes it, but it's created by the private sector, and the private sector needs to have solid, dependable, sustainable infrastructure in order to run on and to develop that wealth.
Let's talk about the infrastructure. It seems the airport is a major priority here.
This destination is well served from probably over a dozen gateways in the United States. The United States and North America generally is our source market for tourism. We actually have outgrown our current facilities, and we have to be improvising in order to process the traffic. So we're making a huge investment in developing a whole new terminal that's going to probably run us into multiple millions of dollars. We're making some good progress with the consultancy, looking at the structure, ownership structure, the funding structure, and hopefully we can all have that done between now and the end of the year. So by next year, we can look at scheduling the actual construction time, which I believe will probably begin in 2024. These big projects have huge life cycle. It takes a long planning cycle, and so we're getting there. We're fortunate in that the Airports Authority itself have significant reserves, and so we should be able to do it quite comfortably without actually consigning the facility to an outside operator.
What about the communication around the islands themselves?
The communication around Turks and Caicos is in need of improvement. Dependency or the ability to communicate between the islands, particularly in a bad hurricane, is a problem. And we are now looking at actually putting a fiber ring around the islands to improve that. That is something that is also topical. And again, I expect that we'll see some movement on that in the current financial year.
Let's talk now about the relationships you have with the nearby territories, like the Bahamas, for instance.
Well, the Bahamas is considered to be family because their bloodlines, of course, the nearest Bahama island is 40 miles off from here. Anagua, Mayaguana, they're between 40 to 60 miles away. And so there's always been freedom of movement between here and the Bahamas, even when even in relationship to the legislation, it's not strictly adhered to when it comes to the movement of people between here and Bahamas. Everybody in the Turks and Caicos Islands and everybody just about in the Bahamas have families in both places. So that relationship is probably our strongest relationship because of our proximity, but also because of the bloodlines between us. Of course, in my capacity as the president of the Caribbean Development Bank, I represent the overseas territories. The position, of course, as you know, is rotational. So I represent places like the British Virgin Islands, Montserrat, Anguilla,
Cayman.
and the Cayman Islands, and Turks and Caicos. But our relationship, our strongest relationship, remains with the Bahamas.
And the historic relationship with, say, Jamaica?
We have a historic relationship with Jamaica because we were sort of a sub-dependence of the UK through Jamaica up until when Jamaica became independent in 1962, right? Then we shared a governor with the Bahamas until the Bahamas became independent. And since then, we've had set up our own governor. So we're more direct. The relationship has become more direct between us and the United Kingdom ever since then. But we still maintain a very strong relationship with Jamaica. Of course, a lot of us, including myself, would have been educated in Jamaican institutions or regional institutions based in Jamaica. So that relationship is very strong, perhaps stronger than it is in the Eastern Caribbean, again, because of proximity and history.
I want to expand that then to the TCI's relationship with the rest of the Caribbean. Let's talk about your role in CARICOM.
I consider myself personally a Caribbean man because I've had the privilege of living in and visiting and developing relationships with people across the region. And I've been around, been involved in public life long enough to appreciate the contributions that have been made by the region. In the past, we've sourced teachers, doctors, engineers, police officers, and you name it, from different parts of the Caribbean, particularly places like Barbados. And more recently, a large number of our police officers have been coming from places like St. Vincent and the Grenadines. I have strong relationships with many of the leaders in the region by virtue of the long time I've spent in politics and meeting them one-on-one and developing relationships. So, I've come to value the importance of it. And while our growth has been uneven, I think it's critical that we kind of develop a mentality of one for all and all for one, because we live in a region that's very volatile, and one could be up today and down tomorrow, and so that sort of a dependence and the strength of having each other's back, to me, is very critical. And so that is something that I believe in, and I think in my role is something that I would like to focus on and promote, that regardless to where each of us may be in terms of our growth, economic growth, we should and could contribute to the region and especially to the bank's operation and the bank's sustainability and survivability, because I noticed in a lot of cases with some of the more prosperous economies, there's this tendency not to appreciate the significant role that the bank plays, and I think that is very short-sighted.
I'll just ask you to just respond to the offer from the president of Guyana, for instance, to deal with food security by offering the vast land space of Guyana for production of food and distribution across the region.
Well, I think that was very magnanimous of him. I think for a place like the Turks and Caicos, it was a small population and significantly removed. The logistical issue of transportation could be a problem in making use of that, even if you have persons here who may want to invest in agriculture or in growing food. There's still the question of how do you get it here. But I do believe there may be opportunities to trade with a place like Guyana, particularly when one look at, I don't know what's the state of their forestry products are, but given our construction boom here in these islands, if there are materials or construction materials that could be sourced from a place like that, would be great. I mean, at the moment, we're sourcing it from other places in the Caribbean, including Haiti and the Dominican Republic, and Cuba, which tend to be a little closer. But again, when you look at what Guyana offers, I mean, most of the light poles are from Guyana. And when you look at the quality of the lumber, I think there are opportunities there to cross-invest across this region in each other's economy to the benefit of the region. I think sometimes we don't realize the strength that we have. We look out for everything and ignore the possibility of developing the relationships that we have by cross-investing in each other's economy, making it easier. I mean, a great example has been the Sandals Corporation and their ability to tap into the resources and provide employment opportunities for many destinations within the region, including Turks and Caicos. In fact, in a lot of destinations, the airline services have been improved as a result of having a large player such as Sandals.
And as you mentioned, an airline, you certainly have a good example in terms of interregional carriage within the Caribbean.
Yeah, we're very proud of Caribbean and its ability to reach out to the rest of the Caribbean sister territories, and I'm hoping that they can continue to, with their expansion and their investment. For us, it's a matter of pride to be able to do that.
Let's turn our attention to one of the other CAPs, that is the Board of Governors of the Overseas Territories. You've had this now role for some time as part of this rotation. What would you say are the priorities?
The overseas territories in the Caribbean have done well, by and large. Most of them, certainly the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos, have done very well. Some of the other territories in the Eastern Caribbean have not done quite as well. There's a terminology that came from a book that was written by another Caribbean personality that says small is beautiful, I think. And I think we underestimate the strength and the ability that we can, and the role that we can play in the region and in the CDB. And what I would like for my colleagues in the overseas territories to do is to, even though I am the rotational governor and the chair, I would certainly want to get their full support because I do believe that we could make this particular conference something extraordinary, and that their presence here could benefit them and the bank. I can certainly see a situation where certainly the Cayman Islands and Turks and Caicos are no longer sort of even though we may be borrowing countries, we're no longer dependent on some of the concessionary funding that the bank may have available, but some of our other sister territories are. And to the extent that we could contribute to the, I don't know, to some kind of fund to help with pockets of needs in those territories or across the region. I think that the kind of conversation we should start to have instead of constantly looking out for everything, because I think it's important to remember where we were once and relate that to where we are today, and understand that the big wheel comes around, and you never know if it'll ever happen again. So that's what I would encourage them to do, and hope that we can play a pivotal role in the success and sustainability of the organization.
The grouping as such has a particular relationship, of course, obviously with Britain. How do you see the territories now helping to reshape the impression or the relationship with Britain?
Well, I tell you one thing, global Britain, in my view, seems very keen on maintaining a relationship with the overseas territories. I think it stands to reason that exiting a Brexit, it means that their sphere of influence is less. And also what we've seen recently with the royal visits through the region, that they cannot make the assumption any longer that the former territories, the former colonies, are happy and is prepared to carry on as usual. So I think there seems to be a willingness to focus more attention on the remaining overseas territories. And to the extent that there's this idea of offering the overseas territories parliamentary representation, direct parliamentary representation in the UK, there are varying degrees of views on that. And it's not something I want to necessarily comment on, because I think, I don't support us being subsumed into the UK or anything like that. But I think the relationship in more recent times, particularly in relationship to the COVID pandemic, have actually served the Turks and Caicos and the overseas territories well. So I don't know where that relationship would end, but clearly there's a yearning from people everywhere to have control of their destiny. And that's where I will leave that. But I believe we do have a role to play in the region, even as we also are influenced and are supported by the United Kingdom. We have to exert our dependency. I rather like the idea of playing the game without the name, whatever, because I think it will serve us well. And I believe relationships are more important than labels. So that's my view.
And you wouldn't label that independence?
As I said, I think playing the game without the name is where my head is, but you know, that decision is to be made by the next generation. We are in the process of developing a more advanced constitution, or trying to, because what we've had, our constitution has regressed since 2006 as a result of the suspension in 2009. So we're looking at developing a more modern partnership relationship with the United Kingdom. Again, given our size, we have to be concerned, and particularly Turks and Caicos, given where we are located, with huge neighbors that are not necessarily quite as democratic as our tradition. We have to be careful about the relationships that we maintain.
And as you talk about your neighbors, Cuba?
Cuba we have Cuba, we got Hispaniola, both which are within 100 miles from our shores. Those are, and of course, our neighbor, the Bahamas. Jamaica is about 400 plus miles away from us. But that's would be our neighborhood there. But
and you're comfortable in that neighborhood?
The biggest threat to Turks and Caicos sovereignty, if you can call it that, since we're not a nation, is really this threat from illegal immigration from our neighbors next door to the south of us. And I do believe the region and the world have an obligation to do a better job of assisting our neighbors in Haiti, so that they are not trafficked, because a large part of what happened is literally trafficking. Poor people don't even know where they're going sometimes, you know. So again, as I discussed with the president in the past, to the extent that the CDB and the region could develop initiatives to help some of our neighbors who are may want to leave, if we can create conditions at home which would prevent that from happening, fewer people will leave, and fewer people will lose their lives on the high seas trying to escape poverty, because it is an economic situation. And it's one that I think developed countries ought to be doing more about and are not.
Let's return now to the Caribbean Development Bank and its role, and you as governor. What would be your driving mantra to the bank at this stage?
I mentioned earlier, I believe, I think the bank has an obligation to prove its own continued relevance as well, but it depends on the governors, all of the countries, right, to take a keen interest in the future of the bank. And I think part of what I would like to see an expansion in the bank's membership, both regionally and globally. And what I'd like us to do again is to see how interregionally what we can do to help each other. Again, using the phrase one for all and all for one. You know, there are some of our countries who are doing quite well, and there's no reason why we shouldn't be contributing to lifting some of our other neighbors, or focusing on projects within particular neighborhoods within our member states. So I think it's a fluid discussion that we have to have. I think there need to be some brainstorming around how the bank could continue to be relevant, and how it can be sustainable, what kind of resilient initiatives it needs to take. No one person has all of the answers, and that is the reason why it's very, very important for members to show up at the board meeting, and you know, so we can have these discussions. Because I would not have detailed knowledge of what's happening in many of the sister or the member countries, the borrowing member countries, unless that face-to-face dialogue is had, and we can come up with a meeting of the minds. It's difficult to divine what each person is thinking and where the specific needs are.
You talk about resilience, a word used a great deal these days, sustainability, etc. How do you see those really impacting the choices we're making for the future of the Caribbean?
Well, I believe resilience to me is a very broad word. Speak in terms both of physical and systemic. Physical, of course, we live in a part of the world where it's very susceptible to severe storms, hurricanes, and so I think we certainly need to be building on that kind of resilience, and I believe we do have institutions that have sort of answered the call. CDB, we've got the strategic insurance program that helps the region as it relates to hurricanes through this, and this is all through the CARICOM. Yeah. But in relationship to the sustainability generally, I also believe there needs to be more from a systems point of view and from a management of the economy point of view. I think there's a lot we can learn from each other. We've got smart people within our diaspora. We have smart people within the region. There can be more in terms of knowledge transfer. There can be And some of our people may even have resources that could be invested in the region to make it more economically sustainable, but also to make the, as I say, the management of the region, both at the political level and at the business level, sustainable and resilient. Infrastructure, building infrastructure, we should make sure that those are resilient. So after a storm, they don't all disappear and now you have to start all over again. In Turks and Caicos, we've been very fortunate with the last hurricane that our source of power is very resilient. I mean, we were literally up when countries were down for up to a year. We're literally up and running within 6 weeks, after a very, very severe storm. So building resilience in terms of the physical plant, the infrastructure, but also our systems of government. The ability to expand our infrastructure rests to some extent on how we manage procurement. And I believe across the region, I'm hearing complaints about the sort of anemic rate of drawdown on public sector investment programs. And so this is where I think we can help each other. The CDB, in particular, with its pool of knowledge and experience and expertise, can help, particularly some of the smaller countries who may not be able to purchase data within the confines of the boundaries of public service pay scales. And so there are all sorts of ways that we can help each other to be more resilient.
Finally, Premier, the CARICOM experience or experiment, some people talk about it. You obviously have great faith in it. Speak to the people.
I believe the ability for people to move freely, particularly at the sort of a tertiary education level, is a good thing. And so, but what I would hope we can move the next step to that, and I'm really serious about how we should look at having a sort of a Caribbean exchange where we can cross-invest in each other's economy. I mean, we still have this ideology that if it comes from the outside, it's better, right? When in fact there's so much we can do for ourselves. And so I think we need to, I don't think we know enough about each other, to be honest with you. And there's always a question of people fear what they don't know, right? And so I think there needs to be some kind of serious effort in creating systems that are transferable, in actually creating standards that would facilitate the movement of people, so that if someone from Turks and Caicos saw a job opportunity in Barbados, right, they had the same opportunity as a Barbadian who live in that country have for that job, particularly if it's a regionally created job. So that kind of movement and the ability to learn more. I mean, in the old days when most of us in the region went to UWI or Micro Training College, I think we knew a lot more about each other. These days, so many of our kids now are not going to regional institutions. They're going to schools in the United States, in the United Kingdom, and Canada, and places. So I think most of the leaders in my age group are people would have known each other because they would have met at university in Jamaica or in Cayfield, Barbados, in Trinidad. But that doesn't happen anymore. So to a large extent, we don't know as much as we used to know. And I think somehow we need to find a way to reacquaint ourselves, because I think that's going to be important for the future development of the region.
Thank you, sir. The Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, Washington Mizik, joining us here ahead of the Caribbean Development Bank's Board of Governors meeting coming in June. I'm Julian Rogers. Welcome. I'm Julian Rogers in the Turks and Caicos. We're here to chat with the Premier of the Turks and Caicos Islands, none other than the Honorable Washington Mizik. He is the current chairman of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, who are due to hold their governors meeting here in the Turks and Caicos in June. We'll talk to the Premier not only about his role as the leader of the country, but also as that of the President of the Board of Governors of the Caribbean Development Bank, and also the President of the UK Overseas Territory Association. He chairs the rotational position as the political counsel. He's also the Vice President of the Turks and Caicos branch of the Commonwealth Parliamentary Association and a representative of the Turks and Caicos Caribbean Heads of Government meetings. Of course, for CARICOM, he's also have that role of building the relationship with regional institutions as well. So, we welcome you, sir.
Thank you. The pleasure is mine. Welcome you, Turks and Caicos. I'm looking forward to a fantastic time here with the rest of the Caribbean and for the CDB board meeting.
Let's talk first, Premier, about the Turks and Caicos. How have you done?
Turks and Caicos has done extremely well. I mean, in terms of where we are and the recognition of the progress that's been made here, it's all been fairly new. Just about everything you see around here is less than 50 years old. So we're basically, can be considered the new kid on the block, if you like. But we have a very successful economy. Tourism obviously is our main industry. In fact, it is sometimes said that Turks and Caicos is probably the most tourism-dependent country in the world next to Macau. And but we've done very well. We have been able to consistently, for the better part of the last 6 years, produce a surplus in our revenue, government revenue, our budgets. We have a BBB+ credit rating. Government have zero debt, and a very hefty reserve, including a sovereign wealth fund. So I think we're doing very well, all things considered. You know.
As you say that, I have to ask you, how did you survive COVID?
A confluence of events or circumstances meant that we pulled through COVID very, very good. We had assistance from the United Kingdom. We got the vaccine early. Our population responded quickly, so we ramped up to about 80% of vaccination rate by the end of the summer of 2021, I think it would be. And then, of course, the fact that we entered the COVID with significant reserve, we were able to really preserve life and livelihood by actually assisting the population through stimulus grants and other assistance. So yeah, we've done very well through COVID.
So having gone through that period, what really are the new priorities here?
Well, you know, there's a word that's overused sometimes called sustainability. And our focus is on building resilience and sustainability. And that involves focusing on ensuring that they not only sustainability in terms of the economy, but also in terms of our sensitive environment, which is very much tied to the economy. Everyone in this island and this country makes their living off the natural capital of the economy, so we're very concerned about ensuring that that is preserved, but also keeping a good social balance. Turks and Caicos depend very, very largely on foreign labor, and so we've got issues of housing and all of those kinds of things that we've got to focus on to ensure that the environment is not degraded and the five-star destination that we are known for is actually maintained. So yes, those are some challenges, but I think we've designed and are designing solutions and approaches to ensure that our economy and our social and environmental sectors are sustainable.
You're fresh from presenting a budget to this country. What would you say are the priority items that you're addressing in this?
You know, a big umbrella issue of my government is human capital development. Okay. Also, another big issue at the moment is price inflation. So and of course the social quality of life issues. So my budget includes a lot of deals with how do we protect the vulnerable. So people are looking for social assistance. We've upped the level of assistance, investing huge amount of money in scholarships, grants, and full scholarships, and investing in education. We just acquired property to put TVAT, expanding or standing up in place a well-functioning hospitality school. So the focus really is on the human capital development, improving the social situation of the public, and also investing heavily in infrastructure. Because I believe that wealth is created by the private sector. Government distributes it, but it's created by the private sector, and the private sector needs to have solid, dependable, sustainable infrastructure in order to run on and to develop that wealth.
Let's talk about the infrastructure. It seems the airport is a major priority here.
This destination is well served from probably over a dozen gateways in the United States. The United States and North America generally is our source market for tourism. We actually have outgrown our current facilities, and we have to be improvising in order to process the traffic. So we're making a huge investment in developing a whole new terminal that's going to probably run us into multiple millions of dollars. We're making some good progress with the consultancy, looking at the structure, ownership structure, the funding structure, and hopefully
our audience across the globe. We are pleased to have you here in your homes and in your offices to discuss this hot button topic for the first webinar of the Caribbean Development Bank 52nd Annual Meeting. We are focused on measuring better to target better. To position this event as part of the broader work being undertaken by CDB to a regional institution focused on improving the lives of each and every citizen, we invite CDB's Vice President of Operation, Mr. Isaac Solomon, to deliver introductory remarks. Mr. Solomon?
Anthony Harvey, Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance, Turks and Caicos Islands Government. Mr. Stephen Farquharson, Technical Officer, Caribbean Regional Organization for Standards and Quality. Mr. Nicholas Zephyrin, Managing Director, Viking Traders Limited. Ms. Erica Luke, Managing Director of Eric Hassel Shipping. Mr. Pierre Bonteneau, Senior Trade Facilitation Advisor, International Trade Center. Other specially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Welcome to the first in a series of seminars leading up to the Caribbean Development Bank's 52nd Annual Board of Governors meeting. This year, the theme Measure Better to Target Better, Adaptation and Resilience will anchor all our activities as we formulate programs to close the distance to the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs. Implementing programs which ensure we create the best future for our people requires collaborative effort driven by evidence-based strategies and precise actions. Creating an appropriate ecosystem to achieve the SDGs mandates a high degree of innovation and responsiveness to establish the capabilities necessary to address our social, financial, environmental, institutional, and economic challenges. One of those challenges is food security, which has recently taken center stage in regional and international discourse and is also embedded in CARICOM's and CDB's agenda. Today, we are pleased to facilitate a seminar entitled Regional Food Security, Streamlining Logistics to Bring Products to Market with a panel of global experts. The dialogue, which is solutions-oriented, will examine the current environment and requirements needed for the Caribbean to achieve food security. It is focused on increasing the trade of agri-food products, improving regional transportation networks, and streamlining border systems and processes. It will also provide a platform for varied perspectives by subject matter experts to posit concrete recommendations and identify quick wins and longer-term opportunities for collaboration amongst our private and public sector partners. For the region, food security has been an ongoing concern as our populations are constantly faced with rising food import levels, which are now trending towards US $6 billion annually. This is further compounded by supply and logistic chain challenges, the fallout from COVID-19, and the impact of the war in Ukraine on food prices in the Caribbean. At the bank, we are championing innovative solutions to respond to our unique circumstances. As we continue to leverage knowledge, innovation, and creativity to foster resilience, drive economic diversity, and increase competitive advantage for our economies, we are investing in the sustainable development of the trade and agricultural sectors to generate food security, lower the food import bill, whilst also promoting diversification and innovation in national economies. CDB, guided by our agricultural strategy and policy and strategic plan, has channeled increasing resources to agriculture seeking to improve both environment and infrastructure and encourage greater efficiency along agricultural value chains. In this regard, we have provided support for the Caribbean Agriculture Health and Food Safety Agency to develop guidelines and capacity building to facilitate intra-regional trade in agriculture. Assisted the CARICOM Organization for Standards and Quality CROSQ to enhance the regional quality infrastructure in 11 countries. Approve $15 million for Haiti to focus on increasing agricultural productivity and improving food and nutrition security. Allocated to the government of Jamaica approximately $54 million from the United Kingdom Caribbean Infrastructure Partnership Fund to introduce new climate-smart agriculture technologies and strengthen food safety infrastructure and systems. Earmark grant funding totaling over $9 million from the European Union to trade-related projects focused on the increasing market access, reducing barriers, and improving infrastructure under the EPA and CSME standby facility. The bank also continues to advance infrastructural works and improve connectivity by financing construction and upgrades of ports, roads, and drainage in our borrowing member countries. Some of our largest projects undertaken are currently underway in St. Vincent and the Grenadines and in Guyana, with others at varying stages of implementation. All are critical to enhancing our logistics ecosystem. Not only are these interventions intended to create competitive economies with improved productivity and market linkages, they will also contribute to greater sustainability, better use of resources,
Thank you so much, Vice President Solomon, for setting out the context of this meaningful and solution-oriented. Thank you very much, President Solomon, for setting out the context for this meaningful and solution-oriented dialogue. To our audience far and wide, again, a warm welcome to the Caribbean Development Bank's first seminar leading up to the 52nd annual meeting of the Board of Governors. I am Anthony Harvey Baston, your host for the day. And you guessed it, I'm here facilitating this session remotely from the Ministry of Finance in the Turks and Caicos Islands. This year, CDB's annual meeting is being hosted in our hometown, TCI. While excited to host the virtual events, and we look forward to welcoming those who will be with us on the island next week in what will be a meaningful and memorable annual meeting. To kick things off today, with over 400 registered participants, 6 streaming partners, and support from UWI TV for broadcast, we have assembled a diverse panel of technical and business persons spread across the globe. Today, joining me to examine issues around food security and the region's ambitions to decrease its imports by 25% by 2025, which is about 3 years away, I am pleased to welcome Mr. Pierre Bartholomew, Senior Trade Facilitation Advisor at Geneva-based International Trade Center.
Thank you, Anthony, and good morning, everyone. Two-thirds of the world population depend on imports to meet their needs to achieve a healthy diet. In other words, 2/3 of the population on Earth needs international trade to meet their basic need to live or to survive. And this, I think, shows how the topic of today is important, not only for the businesses that are involved in logistics and in trade, but for all the population that depend on these imports to achieve food security. And international trade has an impact on the final cost of agricultural products when they reach consumers. And in the past few years, because of the COVID crisis, because also of the current geopolitical turmoil in the east of the Eurasian continent, the commodity prices have surged. And there is a responsibility for all the actors of the supply chain, governments and private sector, to do everything they can to reduce the cost of trade in order to continue to provide qualitative and cost-effective products to the population that need it most. Now, I said that trade, international trade, is important in the final price of goods that consumer must pay when they want to secure their basic need for food security. Now, here on the slide, you can see how 1 day saved in international trade, in international shipping, translate into the landed cost of products. For general cargo, in green on the slide, if you save 1 day in international trade, that will reduce the final price by 5%, which is important. But then when you look at agricultural product, the impact of any days saved in the supply chain is up to 9% of the landed cost. And when you look at perishable products, this impact of time on the final cost of perishable products is up to 17%. And this shows how important it is for the Caribbean region, but for the entire world, to make sure that the supply chain is efficient enough to make sure that as many days can be saved in international trade to reduce the bill of the population that depends on import to achieve their food security requirement. Now, one of the key elements I want to convey today is that trade efficiency depends on many factors. And one needs to understand that it is important that the different components of international trade are under control, are optimized, are upgraded if we want to achieve real gains in terms of food security by lowering the price of imports. So on this slide, you can see in a very schematic way the key processes or the key component of international trade. There is, of course, export. There is, of course, import. And within those two big components, we could have added transit. You have one part which is about the export procedures, all these formalities at the borders that exporters must comply with, obtaining the right certificate of origin, all the license, the permits that they need to obtain before being able to export their goods. You've got then domestic logistic services that needs to be efficient enough to make sure that the goods are transferred from the production site and to the port of departure for international trade. Then you've got the international trade logistics services, shipping, air transport, connecting countries within themselves. But of course, at the end of the chain, once again, you need to go through these steps of domestic transport and import procedures. So it is important always to look at international trade, supply chain, logistics in a holistic perspective and not focus only on one of these components that you see on the slide, because it won't get you the result that you want. And why won't it get you the result that you want? Because cross-border efficiency, supply chain efficiency is a network. And as all networks in the world, their efficiency is determined by the weakest link. So you can improve your port and upgrade your port capacity as much as you want. If it still takes you 3 days to obtain a customs clearance, the efficiency of the entire process is not determined by your port infrastructure. In this case, it would be actually determined by your ability to clear the good in customs. And so it is only by always remembering that international trade and supply chain are a network that is determined by the weakest link, and having this approach to address all the components of this network, all the components of this chain, that we can reach this goal of reducing cost of import and cost of trade and connect countries and regions better. Now, to achieve this logistics efficiency, always keeping in mind that it has to be a holistic approach addressing the different components that I've shown, it is very important to distinguish two sets of factors that will drive the inefficiency or the absence of efficiency in the supply chain system. At the core of logistic efficiency, of course, there is the hard infrastructure. And in this case, we are talking about ports, railway, roads, laboratories for quality testing, quality infrastructure in general. We also have, to some extent, the transport assets. This requires large investment. Now, a very important point is you cannot maximize the use of your hard infrastructure if it is not backed and supported by similar investment and similar upgrades in the soft infrastructure. And by soft infrastructure, I would like to identify two key areas. The first one are about the logistic services themselves that needs to be there and to be efficient and to be cost effective in order to transport the goods from one place to the other. The second soft infrastructure part of supply chain efficiency is linked to the trade formalities. And by trade formalities, I mean all the requirements that are set by government regulatory agencies in order to import or export goods from a country. We are looking at customs, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, immigration, of course, Ministry of Transport. These trade formalities, again, in many cases, can hamper the ability to maximize the use, the utilization rate of your hard infrastructure, because long delays at the customs can lead to long damages because ships are staying in the sea and cannot enter in the port because there is a bottleneck in terms of release of the good from the customs. Now, I want to highlight also two things in addition to this. One is that these aspects of soft infrastructure and hard infrastructure are better achieved when there is a level of regional coordination and regulatory convergence within the region, making sure that the rules that governs logistics services trade formalities as aligned as possible. And of course, we need to leverage on IT solutions in order to optimize the process, optimize the way the infrastructure are run, but optimize also the way logistics services providers deliver the services efficiently and integrate within the supply chain. Leveraging IT solution, again, to make sure that all the process in terms of regulatory compliance with the customs, with the standards body, are as efficient as it can. Now, the panelists will talk at length, I think, of some of the specific challenge in terms of hard infrastructure that there may be in the Caribbean region. And of course, there must be continuous investment in upgrading infrastructures, port, roads, airports. Now, one point that I want to stress is that sometimes investment in hard infrastructure is not enough, and making sure that the private sector as a transparent, fair, and undiscriminated access to this infrastructure is equally important. In some part of the world where I work a lot, the attribution of wagons operated by a railway company is done on an absolutely discriminatory basis. There is no predictability, there is no transparency on when the wagons can be used for the traders to import and export. And despite the fact that the infrastructure are good, that there was investment in assets, the absence of transparent procedures and formality to access the infrastructure is jeopardizing the ability of the region to leverage upon their assets to deepen regional integration. So access to infrastructure has always to be kept in mind. For quality and to ensure qualitative and cost-effective logistics services, there's a few points I want to highlight also. Unfortunately, in most countries, logistic sector is not seen as one. For example, in Thailand, there are 13 different bodies that are regulating the logistics sectors. One body is looking at stevedoring, the other one at the port, the third one at road transport, the postal services, the express carrier service, all done by different institutions. And by doing so, it creates overlapping, overly complex, sometimes redundant, sometimes contradictory requirement for the private sector to operate. And by doing so, it one increase the cost for the private sector to engage into these activities, but at the same time, it prevents having a vertical integration of the logistics sectors because all these institutions are not looking at supply chain as a whole, but only looking at their own little perimeter without acknowledging the impact of their regulation on the entire supply chain perspective. And here, that's a point I want really to stress, the necessity to have a coherent and holistic approach to the way governments regulate logistics services. And what is true at the domestic level is also true at the regional level. And if you've got different environmental standards governing cabotage or a ship's fleet, well, you again create more barriers for logistics service provider to connect within the region because the cost of complying with different regulation in different islands is going to make their business less competitive. Finally, the importance of IT cannot be stressed long enough in this area. I used to work myself as a logistics practitioner in Africa, and I know from my practice, unfortunately, that sometimes there is not a perfect transparency, neither on the availability of reliable service providers for the businesses that sometimes turn to less professional logistics services, which of course impact negatively the entire supply chain. But also sometimes there is a lack of transparency on the pricing of the cost of the logistics service provider and how they are calculated, how they are competing different from each other. And this lack of transparency can be addressed through IT and digital solution, creating platform that creates a level playing field for the business community to identify the logistics service providers that can offer the best services as the most competitive price. Now I want to come to the third point of this, I would say, nexus of supply chain efficiency. And this is about cutting the red tape in border formalities. Again, if you want to optimize your investments in infrastructure and in transport asset, you need to make sure that you don't have bottlenecks that prevent you to utilize your assets fully. And one of the key principles here that I want to stress is governments, in coordination and consultation with the private sector, should find means to move the controls away from the border, to move it away from the big infrastructure to make sure that they are utilized to their maximum potential. And this requires a lot of border agency coordination. Again, the environment governing trade formalities is usually composed of 15, 20 agencies. And if these 15 or 20 agencies are not in a position to get their act together, if I may say so, and that controls are done by the customs, and then controls are done by the sanitary authorities, and then they are done by the health authorities, you're going to create bottlenecks at the borders where the infrastructure sit, and you will again jeopardize your supply chain, I would say, efficiency. To address this, most of the countries in the region enter into and signed, ratified an agreement of the WTO that is known as the Trade Facilitation Agreement. And the objective of this agreement is to set binding obligation for governments to reduce the red tape at borders, to reduce the bureaucracy, to make sure that we can save those days at the border crossings that are so important to ensure that the cost of agricultural products and perishable products remains affordable for the population. There are many measures in this agreement that I won't have the opportunity to go through, but I will really encourage you to look at it. Now, we frequently talk about investments in hard infrastructure, investment in ports, investment in terminals, in roads, but making trade formalities efficient requires investment. And in particular, when governments and countries decide to move from paper-based formalities to digital formalities, when they want to move to paperless trade. And here, there's a lot of investments that are required. Investment that are required to review the laws and regulations of the country to make sure that everything can be digitalized, that the right framework for digitalization exists about cybersecurity, electronic signature at the global level, but within each agency that is party to the international trade. Investment are also required to develop what are known single window initiative, which is pretty much a one point that helps you clear and comply with all your requirements with all these border agencies. And again, we've seen across the world many countries that have not found the right resources and sometimes political momentum and political support to achieve these important reforms. And here I think this aspect of the supply chain should never be overlooked because this is often where a lot of delays happen. Finally, there is a very important aspect of trade which is called risk management. And risk management principle is that you should not control every cargo because it delays the entire supply chain. But the question comes, which cargo do I need to inspect to make sure that I protect my citizen from safety or security risk or sanitary risk? And here again, what we've seen globally is that the countries that manage this process best are the countries that put the funds necessary to develop smart ways using IT to improve the way controls are done and selected at the borders. And here again, it should never be overlooked. All these topics of formalities, of course, have to be coordinated again at the regional level. And I'm not going to expand too much because I understand we are running a bit out of time, but trade is about two countries, at least. In the context of the Caribbean, it is actually the entire region that wants to connect. So whatever is done domestically has to be coherent with what is done with your neighbors to some extent. Trade is always at least a two-party game. And if these two parties, if the two governments don't align the way they administer trade from customs procedures, quality infrastructure, SPS requirements, TBT requirements, gains will never happen. So there is a critical importance of ensuring regional collaboration also in trade formalities from a customs perspective, I would say. Now, and this is almost my concluding slides, all of these reforms can only happen and will only happen and will only be successful if they are done through public-private dialogue. Trade is done by the private sector. And all the reforms must be designed, implemented, monitored in partnership with the private sector. And this is the responsibility of both parties, governments and the business community, to sit together, to identify the problems together, to prioritize the solution together, to design the policies together. And it's only through this mechanism of public-private dialogue that success will be reached. Because there are many private sector stakeholders, there are many government agencies in the supply chain, and no single one of them can find suitable solution on their own. And it's only through this holistic and comprehensive approach of dialogue, getting government and the private sector in the same room, at the same table, that real reform will happen. Finally, and I think we heard this from the opening remarks, all reforms should always keep in mind the development priorities that the world as set for themselves through the Sustainable Development Goals. And when we think about trade, there are a few of them that I would like to highlight. Everything we're talking today is about, of course, zero hunger, making sure that every man, women, children on Earth can access good and affordable agricultural product to meet their food security requirement. But trade is also about gender equality, making sure that women traders, women producers can harness the opportunity opened by international trade for their economic empowerment. It is about climate. We know that international trade has, unfortunately, a negative net impact on trade, on the environment. All investments, all reforms must always keep in mind how these reforms will influence the impact of trade on the environment, similarly on the life below water. Final thoughts. Supply chain efficiency is about working together. It is about looking at supply chain from a holistic perspective, from trade formalities, logistics services, hard infrastructure. Trade efficiency is only achieved when border agency, government agency coordinate among themselves, when countries that contribute to the same supply chain coordinate among themselves, and it only works when government and private sector sit together to find the right solution to make trade an enabler of food security. Thank you very much. Athene, back to you.
Which looked at challenges and solutions in the logistic arena to improve trade efficiency in the agricultural products. Your insight was appropriate with the appropriate measures and solutions to improve trade and logistic ecosystems focused on food security. You know, from the delivery, we cannot tell that Pierre has completed his workday in Geneva since it is beyond 4 p.m. on that side of the globe. Thank you very much. You did a succinctly captured 3 critical logistic elements: infrastructure, regulation, and information flows. Also joining us today and to be a part of our panel is Mr. Nicholas Zaffarin, the Managing Director, Chief Executive Officer, Viking Trade Limited, St. Lucia. Along with him is Mr. Stephen Farrakhanson, Technical Officer, Accreditation and Conformity Assessment at CARICOM Regional Organization for Standards and Quality, better known as CrossQ in Barbados. He replaces Mr. Derek Omar, CrossQ's CEO, who is unavoidably absent. And last but no means least, Ms. Erica Luke, Managing Director of a family-owned Eric Hustle Shipping, and also headquarters in Barbados. At this session, we are honing in on solutions. Today, we interrogate how various within the logistics and trade ecosystem are uniquely challenged and impacted, and what can be realistically accomplished by the cross-section of interests to enhance environment, achieve objectives, and set and agree to by Caribbean community, and also how regional, national interests can align to build more resilient economies to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals as CDB's Vice President expressed. Our panel can undoubtedly provide unique insight into challenges, opportunities in these areas. What can be seen from the presentation is an inextricable link between food security and trade facilitation. As we begin our discussions, looking at our region which is comprised of many countries with varying processes, procedures, standards, and commodities. How do we identify strategies and, more importantly, implement more going forward with vision of improved food security and increasing efficiency across broad, broader trade? Let's start by a local level and work our way up. If I can bring Nicholas in, your company, Viking Trade, which is an operating from a base in the OECS, has been exporting a host of commodities, sauces, baking products, drinking, and other agri-foods for many years in the Caribbean. Do you have any thoughts on what was presented from a viewpoint of a regional exporter?
Yes. Well, the presentation uh, so far has been very um, insightful. And as a manufacturer of food products, Viking Traders follows the HACCP system, which is the Food Safety and Quality Management System. For all the products it produces, we purchase raw materials, bananas, mangoes, coffee, green coffee beans, hot peppers, a wide range of raw materials which we use in our process. And we produce products to a very high standard. And these products, finished products, are exported not only in the region, but also into Europe, Canada, and the USA. So um, we have seen the logistics side, as mentioned, as being very critical, that it needs to be done in consultation with the private sector and government, and not just on a one way street. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Erica, I'm certain wearing your private sector hat, you can identify some broader issues and remedies we can institute within shipping and logistics. What has been your experience taught you based on what Pierre has stated?
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you, Anthony, and thank you to CDB for inviting me here to speak on this very important topic. I've been working for 30 years within the shipping and logistics industry. So what I can say is that I know that this effort towards reducing our food imports by 25% by 2025 is possible once we all work towards that goal. From my perspective, we handle some very small vessels that arrive to Barbados out of St. Vincent twice every week. We import about 50 tons of fruit and vegetables, and I'm talking about everything from coconuts to bananas, plantains, turmeric, edos, avocados, mangoes. Um, and so I believe that the same way that we can do this model and get it to the market in 24 hours after the vessel has arrived, this means we can do this at a larger scale. This model can be replicated from Guyana and Suriname, you know. I also believe that, if you look at what is currently happening in Barbados, we import roughly 600 to 700 tons of fruit and vegetables out of the US. These are imported in chilled or refrigerated containers, which of course, all of this product is not coming from Florida. Some of it is coming from as far as California. So you're looking at other issues in terms of, is this the freshest product we're getting? No, I firmly believe that we can get fresher product right here in the Caribbean.
Thank you for that, Erica. And Stephen, do you care to weigh in examining organizations, including Cross-Q, aid in increasing market penetration and availability of agri products.
Thank you, Anthony. Uh, First of all, let me say that the presentation by Pierre resonates very much with the objectives and activities of CrossCube. And as we look at, first of all, why are we here? I would think that we have to realize that one of the challenge has been that we have been price focused more so than quality focused. And the quality is what is going to drive the efficiencies and drive the effectiveness and the cross-border facilitation of trade. And so as we look at how we resolve the challenges that tend to trade in this region, one of the points that Pierre made is that we have to look at all sides of the equation and look at what are the weakest links. And again, we have to look at how do we incorporate the procedures and processes that the manufacturers and producers are using by having harmonized standards, harmonized regulations. We also have to look deeper at what are the next steps, which is then to have a system of testing and inspection. And by extension, how do we build trust into the products and services and the tests that are done? We have to look at our certification processes. We have to look at and having those inspection services, those inspectors that go to verify that these products are fit for purpose. Then we also now have to get involved in getting accreditation of those services and verification processes. So it's a loop of having all of the value chain for the product have a trust relationship between the producer, the inspectors, the certifiers, and the market. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen, for that contribution. I want to throw this question out to Erica, Nicholas, and Pierre. What then is one major issue and workable solution from your lens?
I would like to comment that one of the major issues we face is that we are unable to get a sufficient supply of raw materials for our production within the region, and there are a lot of SPS, sanitary and phytosanitary issues that block the free movement of agri-goods. For example, the shipment of coconuts, as an example, from Guyana to the DR, which is a member of CARICOM, they sell hundreds of containers a year. I mean, it's now increased to $11 million in coconuts. And here we are not allowed to bring in dried coconuts for our manufacturing operation. So if we're talking about harmonizing trade, I think that is something that we should all look into.
Anthony, unfortunately, I think you were muted.
Sorry, my problem. Thank you very much, Nicholas. I was asking if Erica or Pierre, would you like to weigh in on this discussion?
Maybe, yes, briefly, and I think I was really interested by the last two comments when it comes to the sanitary and phytosanitary requirements, and more globally, how quality-related and compliance-related license, permit, certification requirement can indeed hamper trade. And this is a phenomenon that we see across the globe as being one of the key hindrance to regional integration process or regionalization process of value chains. And here, there is not a silver bullet to this, because the quality infrastructure, as you may know, is composed of several layers. You need first to make sure that your mandatory requirements when it comes to quality, let's say pesticide residues that are tolerable in products, are relatively the same between countries. Then you need to make sure that your conformity assessment bodies will apply the same testing methods so that they can recognize each other's results. Then you need them to get accredited. And I think, Stefan, you pointed out to this, which of course is again a lengthy process to get accreditation. We can talk about 5-10 years process with heavy investment in the laboratory capacity, but also in training the staff to get to this level. And then it's only when you have built on both sides of the borders or on the different islands, and we say these layers of capabilities, that you can then connect. And it's only when you connect that success happen, because when you connect, what happens pretty much, it means that the certificates issued by country A will be automatically recognized by country B, which definitely simplifies the bureaucratic requirements, but also potentially opens them more opportunity to source product from other countries that are themselves aligned with the same standards, applying the same type of testing protocols, and get some accreditation. And here I just want to close this remark saying that there are a lot of international standards set by international organizations, in particular in the area of agricultural product. And the more countries do their best to align themselves with the standard, the easier it will be for them both to import and to export to other countries, because they will be working at the right level. A very important point that goes beyond trade is that this only happens if the producers are supported by training, by investment to meet these quality requirements. Because if you set too high standards and then nobody can comply with it, what's the point? So here again, it's really a balancing act to make sure that the production capabilities increase at the same time as the, I would say, government-run compliance dynamics also increase to create a more conducive business environment.
Thank you, Pia, for that well thought out response and very interesting. At this point, I want to remind the online audience, which includes over 400 registered participants, to also pose questions. These will also be presented to the panel for responses. I want to pose this question here. A key commitment coming out of the 33rd intersessional meeting at CARICOM heads of government and reiterated by heads of the Agri-Investment Forum Guyana last month is the need for the implementation of policies by regional government to reduce the regional food bill by 25% by the year 2025. That is 25 by 25. In what ways could your agency contribute to this objective? I want to invite Erica to respond to this.
Okay. Yeah, I think, first of all, I think we need to promote the fact that there are services within the region. As you know, I'm in the shipping industry. So we need to promote that there are services going within our region. As I said, some of them are very focused on North America. And so they're not all focused on the interregional trade. But what we need to do is engage those vessel operators and vessel owners and let them understand what it is we're trying to achieve. We also need to engage the actual importers, because as we know, the importers are the ones who find it very easy to go outside of the region. They get the prices they need, et cetera, but we can look within our region. And once the trade is there, once the demand is there, then that gives inducement to the lines, and then the lines will provide the services. So, for example, we have currently a direct service that goes from Trinidad, then it will go to Suriname, Guyana, and then back up to Barbados, right through the region. But one of the things we need to look at is whether Guyana, for example, whether there are the capabilities there at their port to handle refrigerated produce. Do they have the refrigerated trucks to supply the produce to the port? All of these are issues that I believe we need to seriously look at. But as I said, I do believe this is achievable.
Thank you, Arthur. Nicholas, do you wish to weigh in on this question? Nicholas, I think your mic is muted.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, as mentioned about the refrigerated containers from Guyana, well, we know for a fact that they are, because that's how the coconuts were supposed to be shipped to us on that point. Another issue is that you have certain products that are labeled, they produce for ex-CARICOM territory, but they are made outside of CARICOM. And when we look at that, how do we then compete with what we produce right here in CARICOM? We need the support in CARICOM to be able to develop capacity as agro producers and increase output of agri goods. We can do it, and we will. Could anyone help explain why that should be?
Thank you, Nicholas. Stephen, do you care to weigh in as well?
Definitely. Let me first of all say that one of the things that we have to do if we're going to look at reducing the import bill is to look at managing and improving local production as well. And to do that, it requires that efficiency of the production process must be examined. And in examining the efficiency of production process, we also have to look at the effectiveness of implementing the requirements that would incentivize producers to produce more, as well as to get that product to market more easily. And that includes, one, implementing the appropriate procedures that would reduce waste, reduce customer complaint, reduce the challenges and cost of production. And in so doing, you also now have to look at what are how do we achieve this? And that would be done, of course, by having appropriate rules of engagement through standards, looking at effective testing regimes that would ensure the quality of your production and product. Looking at, and Pierre said it so well in his presentation earlier, looking at the systems and processes that would impact on, for example, your waste management processes, and ultimately engaging and having the trust of the market to have that demand for local products. Because we know that, in fact, our consumers tend to go for the foreign products. Why? Because it's trust. They believe that these foreign products will give more utility to them. But we have to build that trust in our local product through standards, through certification, through good testing and inspection systems. And if we build that, believe me, we can reduce our import by more than 25% in the next couple of years.
You're absolutely right, Stephen, and I agree 100% with you on that matter. Standards are extremely important. But what I was referring to was a trade anomaly where a product is labeled produce for a particular CARICOM country, However, that product is not produced in CARICOM. That product is produced, let's say, in the Far East and is imported into CARICOM. How could that reduce the food import bill?
If I may respond to that a little bit, one of the things that we have to look at as we engage really is there are instances of food fraud, of label verification, of assessing the product, and also have to look at the entry requirements, that we how those entry requirements are put in place and managed and verified on the various levels, and these are things that we have to build capacity in our member countries to respond to those challenges, and right now as we speak, we are looking at harmonizing our standards processes within the region. We have been doing that for some time, harmonizing standards, but the process of verification and inspection and management is something that we have to look closely at, and is an opportunity actually as we go forward.
Thank you, panelists, for actually providing those responses on how we can contribute to the objective of the 25 by 25. If we can move away and look at how, and we can look at another question. How could digitalization reduce logistical connectivity issues faced by regulatory bodies, private sector entities, and shipping industry? Let's start off with Erica.
Yeah, well, the first thing that digitization will do in the shipping industry, and it has been doing, is speed, increasing the speed of the processes. So we're seeing digitization, as you know, not only with our customs processes, with the implementation of Asacuda World, which was recently implemented in Barbados as well, quite successfully. But we're even seeing digitization now in terms of the bills of ladings. So we're seeing now that some of the carriers don't want you to use a paper document anymore. They're insisting that you process with the electronic document. It is secure, but it is also, it speeds up the process so much more. So many times shipments will arrive in a port and cannot be cleared because the original documentation is stuck in another country due to a failure by the couriers. And so those goods cannot be cleared unless the original documentation is in hand. But with the e-bill system, electronic bill of lading system, this will assist those processes so much more. And I think, not just globally, but even within the Caribbean, we are coming along with that e-bill of lading system. And other processes, as we've seen throughout COVID, most of our transactions in shipping were done online. Releases are done online. Payments to the port was online. So you literally didn't have to visit our office if you didn't need to. So I can see that the way we are going is definitely going to continue to add efficiencies. We just need to look more at the hard infrastructure and the logistics at the ports and so forth.
Thank you very much, Erica. Nicholas, Stephen, Pierre, any additional views?
If I may, this is something that is also a very interesting and important regime that we have to look at. And let me say that just Monday, I was in a seminar, a webinar rather, with the International Organization for Standardization. And they are looking at the next level of digitization of the standards process. So currently, we have moved away from a totally paper-based standards process to the the soft copy versions of these documents being available instantly at the touch of a click of a button. But they're moving now to the next generation, where the standards will be machine readable, and eventually machine interpretable, which will be the fourth generation. We're not there yet, but what we have to begin to do is to look at how do we get the stakeholders on the ground to begin to embrace the digitalization, of standards, and then the digitalization of regulations, because then at the port of entry, and the producers, the manufacturers, the farmers will know what are the regulations right at their fingertip, on their phones. What are the requirements for a product? What are the engagements that they will need to be involved in or with to get their product to market across the border? And so these are things that we really have to embrace and begin to train our stakeholders to use and understand the digital economy that we are in now.
Thank you very much, Stephen.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. And the fact that manufacturers or producers who have their website online can have that linked to standards, to, let's say, farms or cooperatives who depend on cooperatives for supplying their raw materials. So maybe there's a harvesting cycle. We could basically know when crops are going to be available, that we can gear our production, receiving of raw materials to suit the ability of when the farms are ready to supply. So I think anything in that direction is very positive.
Maybe, Anthony, if I may also contribute to this question on digitalization. ITC, the organization that I represent, has conducted in 20, 30 countries some detailed analysis of the formalities to import or export. And in most of the countries we've worked, you need actually between 40 and 50 interactions between the business and government authorities to be able to import and export. You need usually up to 120 documents to complete an entire international trade transaction. So 89 interaction, this is 89 times someone, if you're on a paper-based mode, that's 89 times that someone has to take his car, get to an agency, wait in line, give the paper, wait for the stamp to be put, get the paper back, go back in this car, go back to the office, get another document, etc., etc., etc. 89 times. And every time you need different copies to print the same documents, not once, twice, 3 times, but some documents are requested up to 15 times in an international trade process, every time. And same government agencies from the same government are going to ask you the same document many, many times, and potentially not accepting copy. So of course, digitalization is key to solve all of this, because it limits the need for physically moving, which is a huge loss of time, and time is money. It also allows for traders to submit documents only once, and then it is for the IT system to dispatch these documents to the different agency that requires those documents, which of course, I'll just flag it, needs quite some change in laws and regulations so that government agencies accept copies and soft copies of document and not the original, but this is just changing a bit of regulation. Mm-hmm. Now, there's 2 points I want to flag in digitalization. One, don't digitalize complexity. If your processes of import and export are complex, just bringing IT will not solve things. Before you bring IT, rationalize things. That's something we've seen all over the world, where some countries have rushed into digitalization without looking at the relevance of certain of the requirements. And when you put this in IT, it's not easier to solve complexity. So my key point with digitalization is simplify first and digitalize once it's simple. Don't do it the other way around. The second point is that digitalization is even better when it's done at the regional or international level. And digital document can be shared across border. And more we see automatic data exchange across border administration or between the traders and the administration. And here I want to flag again two things. There's a very important measure that may be available in some of your countries. It is called pre-arrival processing by the customs, which means you are supposed to submit all your customs information ahead of the ship arrival to the port, so that the customs can, before the ship arrives at the port, starts to process and assess whether inspections controls are required when the cargo will be there. Of course, this is easier done when it's digitalized, and this type of measures can really reduce the time and the bureaucracy at the port. Now, and I want to take this opportunity also to answer some of Nicolas' point on this, let's say, a cargo labeled under CARICOM that are not coming from CARICOM, and how digitalization can solve this. This type of problem usually are solved by the certificate of origin. Here we have a problem of origin, if I understand correctly. You've got a product claiming that it's from the region that then may be granted some preferential access while it is not. Well, there's a document that usually sorts this problem, and this document is the certificate of origin. Unfortunately, it's not that hard to falsify certificate of origin, and this is where digitalization becomes so critical, because through digitalization you can actually access global ledger where all the certificate of origin issued by any chambers are registered, and just by taking your phone and scanning a barcode on the certificate of origin, the custom authority can verify whether indeed this product is originating from a CARICOM country or whether it's originating from the Far East. And here, digitalization, in addition to speeding process, is actually a great leverage to ensure trust and authenticity of the documentation within international trade.
Thank you, Pierre. Thank you, panelists, for that in-depth discussion about digitalization. Now we're going to turn to our online viewers for our first question. There's a question from Maui. The private sector can help with food logistics and food security, diversify. Solar and farming works good together. So why not make financing available for private sector to reduce the bill of when import and increase export? If we want to achieve trade efficiency, start discovering green opportunities. Panelists, do you care to weigh in?
Well, I think if I may start, that's one of the objectives that our government is looking at with Guyana. I know they've been speaking on bringing, I don't remember what they call those houses, but type of a greenhouse that they build in Guyana. And they're looking at bringing that model over here in terms of farming. But yes, I do believe that the private sector will need access to financing. They will need that assistance. Even if we look at it in terms of the vessels and trying to make the facilities available for the vessels to transport chilled goods, they will need refrigeration facilities. So there would be financing that would be needed. Maybe even CDB might be interested in assisting in that area.
Thank you very much, Erica. Nicholas, do you care to weigh in?
Yeah, I would definitely say that another aspect is solar energy, putting solar panels on rooftops, etc., to help reduce energy costs, especially the serious price hikes we've had with fuel in recent times and electricity cost. So that's a big win for the private sector, for food manufacturers, especially when you have differences in cost of fuel between islands in CARICOM. That would help to smooth the different, make the playing field more level in that regard.
Okay. Thank you very much, Nicholas, for your contribution into the discussion.
Maybe Athene on this one, just very, very quickly, I promise. I think the idea is brilliant to develop local production capacities, but one has to remember that probably solar panels have to be imported. And while of course your food bill will drop down, you've got another bill that's going to go up. And again, some of the problems that we're hearing about the necessity to improve logistics and supply chain will be transferred from agricultural product to other products. So again, the world is not an island, and even if you're an island, you are connected to the world, and you will always need to rely on trade, even to improve domestic production capabilities, or even import fertilizers or new entrants for the agriculture. So even solar panels need trade.
That's right.
Thank you, Pierre. If we can move on to our next question, it's from a LinkedIn user. Is there a regional collaboration and engagement initiatives between various ports or port authorities in the region? Engagement is critical in identifying next steps in this regard. What are your thoughts and perspectives on getting more persons involved, especially our regional business owners, entrepreneurs, and Chamber of Commerce, so that there can be more collaboration, identification of key issues and standards required with a view of developing regional and country, regional and country?
Yes, I would. They are definitely port associations. There's a Caribbean Port Association. There's also a Caribbean Shipping Association. So I think I definitely agree with the person who's posed the question, in that they're suggesting that we need to bring the partners together. So yes, we need to engage the ports, business owners, but I think we also need to involve the public sector, and the different aspects, customs, the border control, and so on. We need to bring all the partners together. I don't know if you want to weigh in on that, Stephen. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to note that one of the work that CrossQ is doing is looking at value chains through what we call stakeholder national dialogue. And these national dialogues actually bring the various stakeholders of a particular value chain together to discuss what are the challenges, what are the needs, what are the areas of concern. And let me say that some of this is actually sponsored by CDB. So it's good that we are here today under a CDB flag. And not only that, all of the processes in the quality infrastructure, and all of which CrossQ is particularly engaged in, with the support of CDB and the EU, among other sponsors, is to help engage stakeholders in standards development. So the good standards development practices requires that all stakeholders participate in the process for the standards for a particular product or service. Also, at the level of the regulation, again, it requires good regulatory practices, require that the stakeholders are engaged together to move as to whether or not, one, there's a need for regulation, two, what type of regulation is required, and three, what are the parameters of that regulation. And those two major processes would be the background, the backbone, if you're going to go into other aspects now of the implementation process, because the stakeholder would have been involved in defining the protocols and procedures.
Thank you very much, Stephen, for CrossQ's perspective on that question. We also have another question from Janet from our online audience. The healthiest and most nutritious human diet is a wide diversity of local grown foods. Local agriculture is the foundation of resilient food systems, but has contracted dangerously in the Caribbean. The pandemic rapidly revealed the vulnerability of the Caribbean region to imported foods, with pricing and supply chain threats affecting household nutrition and pocketbooks. Strengthening intensification of domestic production requires improved management of soil and water resource systems. Panelists, do you care to weigh in on this?
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a solid point the listeners raised, because when visitors comes to our shores, they don't want to necessarily buy the same fruits, the apples, the kiwi, the grapes, and the meals that they get at home, but want to experience a difference. We also want to reduce the dependence on foreign watermelons, pineapples, lettuce, tamarinds, etc. Instead of IP, imported produce, it should be LP, local produce, or CP, CARICOM produce. It is better late than never. COVID-19 has definitely caused a crippling effect over our dependence on the outside food, and therefore the caller is very correct in her answer.
Yeah. And I think we need to probably look at what is happening in some of the other countries. I mean, maybe look at Central America and Mexico, who are exporting so many pineapples and avocados and other produce into North America. Perhaps it's time that we take a visit to those countries and see how they're doing what they're doing, because there's no reason why this can't be replicated. And I'll go back to what's happening in St. Vincent, because as I said, this is a continuous export base that's coming into Barbados every week. It's being examined and inspected by the authorities like any other shipment, and they're all being accepted into the island. So it is not that it's of a lesser quality or anything. The quality is perfect. So in St. Vincent, they obviously have the correct sanitization, the correct means of washing and bathing the fruit and vegetables, packaging it, palletizing it, and then it's coming in on our vessel, which has a ramp. We put a forklift in and we roll it out. And as I said, it's into market immediately. So I do believe that once we can get some of this infrastructure in place in some of those food producing countries like Guyana and Suriname, that we can see more of these imports.
Thank you very much, Erica. Now, Nicholas and Erica, high prices of imported food, shortages, and increased prices of fertilization and other agricultural inputs have been prominent of late. Are there any quick wins that can be implemented or driven by the private sector or the state to address these circumstances?
The quick win, I would think, is the harmonizing of the treatment of goods, agri-goods at the ports, so that there's no variability, wide variability in how these goods are treated, so that they could move freely between the islands. Our mission as an agro-processor is to utilize all the agri-produce that we can locally first, and then when we cannot get it locally, we look regionally, and that is how we base our production. So when we see that the harmonizing of the treatment of agri-goods can be achieved, it would be a win-win for all, I think.
Thank you very much. Erica, do you care to weigh in?
Well, I think as Nicholas said, the harmonization is very, very important. It can be one standard for some and another standard for others. But you know, we don't have to look too far. We know that it can happen, and so we just need to have the will. We need to involve the importers, because, you know, some of our major importers here, you know, you go into the stores and you'll see tamarinds coming from Turkey, and, you know, we don't need to do that. So it will involve those importers. We need to bring them on board, get them to understand the importance of this effort.
Thank you very much. Pierre, if I can come back to you, what partnerships are needed between public and private entities and national and multilateral agencies, including CDB, CARICOM, and CrossCrew, to improve the logistics system?
No, thank you for this question, Anthony. I think partnership is really the term that defines any reform or any way forward in the area of logistics. And I would like to stress different levels of partnership that are required here, reacting also to some earlier question. The first one is a partnership among the private sector themselves to create the right coalition at the national and regional level to influence the policymaking process and the reforms, and to prioritize the investment that are really needed for the business to thrive and for the, let's say, the regional products to be more efficiently sourced from one island to the other. And this doesn't come that easily, because different parts of the business sector have sometimes diverging interest. The shipping lines may not have exactly the same interest that the stevedoring, that may not have exactly the same interest than the customs broker, which may not have the same interest than the truckers. And so there is really some work to be done by the private sector to create a common, to set up their own priorities among themselves, to be able to have an impact with their government. Then the partnership between the private sector and the government, when the private sector has, I would say, clarified its priority, then it is, of course, to engage into this. Usually it's better when it's an institutionalized and continuous dialogue. I've worked with government all the time. Coming in and saying, I'm not happy with this, and go back, don't get you anywhere. It is actually to build this trust. It's a term that has been used many times. Across time, through established committees, commission, where issues can be prioritized and discussed. And with this, beyond the terms of partnership, there is some importance to always understand what are the requirements of the other side. And sometimes the private sector doesn't realize or that the government also has some legitimate policy objectives in controlling, inspecting the cargo. So everyone in this spirit of partnership has to come together. Now, partnership at the bigger level, at the regional level, maybe, I think it is great that the Caribbean Development Bank is steering this process, because when we talk about trade, often the finance part of trade is not seen that well. And throughout the discussion, we've seen the need for investment, supporting farmers, supporting infrastructures, supporting the soft part of infrastructure for digitalization. And here, I think also broadening the partnership to involve the financial sector and the insurance in the discussion is very important. And finally, at a global level, I could only encourage all the countries and the private sector to follow, for example, the ongoing negotiation in agriculture at the World Trade Organization, and of course to connect with other countries and other organizations to learn about applicable international standards, to learn about best practices for deepening regional integration through trade. And again, as a representative of ITC today, you can always call to organization to try to bring some experiences and expertise in how to make supply chain efficient for food security.
Thank you very much, Pierre, for the response to that. We have a sent in message from Jose. So Jose states, unless we lower the cost of production, we will continue to struggle to reduce the import bill. Access to credit is the limiting factor. Can we get Pierre to weigh in on that, please? Sorry, Nicholas, to weigh in on that.
Okay. access to credit is very important, because when we look at the achieving the goal of food sustainability and food security, it is going to require a paradigm shift among uh, food producers to realize that, okay, we've been here for so many years, in our case, 30 years plus, that we now need to invest more heavily in capital and to have more machinery, to hire more labor. And what that is going to do is going to have a multiplier effect on the economy. But for us as individual producers, we will be able to reduce our unit cost of production and benefit from economies of scale. And then we'll be able to better make those linkages, and then it will all go well for the whole economy. So as manufacturers realize that this is the opportunity, they need to expand, they need to invest at this critical juncture. This will play a very meaningful role, I believe, in helping to transform the situation as it stands right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Nicholas. Erica, do you care to provide any feedback?
I think it was you, Erika.
Oh, sorry. I'll let you go up here. I'll let you go. I'll let you get a go at that. Thank you.
I mean, in an economy-driven, I'll say, indeed, if the cost of production locally remains high, there will be an incentive to rely on imports instead of local consumption. I think that's true, and I'm sure there are some type of crops or agricultural product that will probably never be more cost effective to grow in this region than in other parts of the world. And maybe that's okay also, that sometimes it's a better trade-off to import some products than produce them locally at a higher price. What is disturbing from some of the comments I heard is that products that are grown locally are being imported from elsewhere. And I think this is where work has to be done, indeed, probably to help producers through credit and financing to make economies of scales, probably by investing, as you were saying, Nicholas, in machinery, to make the necessary productivity gains in order for their products to be competitive on the market at the national and regional level. But once again, as I've tried to show at the beginning, the cost of trade, even between islands, I'm sure, has an impact on the shelf price of the final product. So here again, I think providing financing also to the private sector to upgrade, I don't know, their modus operandi, introducing digitalization, as Erika was mentioning before, to expedite and reduce the cost of logistics services, port operation, will be equally important to make sure that local food producers can be competitive domestically and regionally.
Thank you, Pierre. We have another. Sorry, go ahead.
I would like to weigh in a little bit on that because cost of production, actually, there are different levels to the cost of production. And as I said earlier, one of the ways of reducing the cost of production is by reducing your waste, reducing the energy cost where it is so involved, and increasing the efficiency and productivity of the labor staff, and that includes sitting down, analyzing your production process, looking at the steps that are being involved, and see how through a quality approach you can effectively build in efficiencies that is sometimes not looked at in a casual look. You know, we tend to do things traditional ways and so on, but having some guidance, having procedures, having built-in discipline can also help in reducing your waste, in increasing your quality of the product, and therefore reducing the cost of dumping products that would have been produced, or repeating, having to do a particular step twice or three times before you get it right.
Okay, thank you, Stephen, for getting cross cues on feedback on that matter. We have another question from Mali, from our online listener. Knowing renewable energy will help trade and manufacturing to be climate resilient and develop food security for SIDS, a win-win. Panelists, do you care to weigh in on this?
Yeah, well, we spoke about renewable energy, and I mean, I know in Dominica, for example, they have the geothermal energy and solar energy, as we mentioned before, um, for your production operations. Definitely, all those factors can help reduce cost, and electricity costs in particular, which is very high in the Caribbean.
Thank you, Nicholas. Stephen, do you have any contribution?
Well, I would like to say that one of the things that CrossQ is doing currently, as we speak, through sponsorships, and that is, I need to highlight here, that's partnership and collaboration, interagency collaboration is very important, because at this time we're involved in looking at energy efficiency program. Now, it's not specific to the agri sector, but generally speaking, looking at how we can reduce the cost of refrigeration, ACs, and lighting through the testing of products before sale. And eventually, we hope that we will have a regulatory framework. But at this time, it's a voluntary framework within which we're asking importers of particular equipment for refrigeration, ACs, and lighting to have a test done on those equipment that will demonstrate that this product is utilizing less energy costs, reducing energy consumption rather, and then it would have those products labeled as such, and consumers can then make a choice. In the wider market, of course, renewable energy is probably the way to go. One of I think Pierre mentioned though that you'll now transfer, because you'll have to look at how can we verify the efficacy of some of these so-called energy efficient, for example, photovoltaic cells. You know, it says it's a 1,000 kilowatt unit, but then when you test it, you may find that it is not. So we have to also build in some kind of testing regime into that as well. So you know, it's a balancing act, so to speak.
Thank you very much. In terms of partnerships, what partnerships do you think are needed between the public and private entities and local and multilateral agencies to improve strength in shipping networks in the region?
If I may start, for us, within the regional network of standards bodies and quality institutions, partnership is critical. It is important. We just can't do without partnerships and collaborations. And so, you know, our partnerships with various regional and international organizations have been really important and driving the work that we are doing. And let me take this opportunity to highlight some of the partnerships that we have going now. and how it will impact eventually on shipping and logistics. For example, we are partnering with CDB and the EU to have 7 laboratories and conformity assessment bodies accredited to international standards. We're partnering to have 6 private sector organizations. A lot of them are agriculture-based, agro-processing-based institutions to get them certified to international standards. We are working with a number of calibration labs across the region, what we call national metrology institutions. These are the testing of measurement devices and so on, for mass, for frequency, for volume, for various aspects, any kind of measurement requirement for trade. We're partnering to have these labs accredited or internationally recognized in some form or the other to build a quality management system into this. We're also partnering to have value chain analysis, as I said before. We're having national dialogues, and we are now we have developed a regional quality policy, which is now being transcended into national quality policies in various countries across the region. And this is helping in terms of having a framework around which we can build a quality process. We are also partnering to have national quality awards in some member countries, and these awards will bring focus into quality production and give companies, private sector companies, the bragging right to say that my production process has won this award, and we are, it's a demonstration of how well we are doing. And these partnerships that I've mentioned, which are just a few, is showing that when we put money, and let me start the other way, when we have a plan, a potential, an idea that is then transitioned to a plan, and then transition from a plan to a product, built in with a quality as a foundation. And we have the partnership that will put us together to implement and have those processes as best efficient as possible. Anything can be achieved, and therefore we have to ensure that we have a good partnership in building out our agro sector and in building out our logistic processes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stephen. You can see that partnership, we're seeing that partnership is key in us achieving the 25 by 25. And I think every panelist who has taken part in the discussions today, to our online audience, time has definitely flown. As we wrap up things, each panelist, what would be a quick win that could be implemented to immediately improve the regional logistics system for agri-food? Ladies first. Let's start with Erica. Over to you.
Sorry, could you repeat your question? Sorry.
No problem, Erica. Yeah. What's one quick win that could be implemented to immediately improve the regional logistics system for agri-food?
Well, I think the quick win is for us to really embrace what we have within this region and to do our best to develop it, because as we've all seen over the last 2 years, what has happened to freight costs. We're importing everything extra regionally, internationally. And we've seen freight costs escalate, sometimes 100%, 200% out of the Far East. So I think this shows us how vulnerable we are to these external shocks. You know, you're seeing what's happening with fuel prices right now. The costs are still increasing. So if there's nothing that should convince us more, it is that we need to look within and develop with what we have here within this region. And that's my quick win, that we can really achieve this 25% by 2025 if we really get together and want to do this. We can make it happen.
Thank you, Erica. Stephen, do you care to share?
Sure. My quick win would be to have a centralized database that provide market intelligence as to what is required, by whom, and by when, so that, you know, our producers or our regulators can harmonize in having a central spot online, digitally available, so that all would have the same harmonized stage where you can go to get market intelligence to build out things. And I think we can partner with CDB, hopefully, or others to build this system and have it available immediately for you. So our standards, our regulations, and our other protocols can be centralized and easily accessible.
Thank you, Stephen. Nicholas, do you have any thoughts on one quick win?
Okay, as Stephen mentioned about harmonization, especially in regards to SPS issues that hold back the free trade of agri-goods through the region. I would agree with that. And also that CARICOM country, I want to praise the recent agreement between Guyana and Barbados to assist farmers in the drought season and to encourage more goods to take place and processing facilities to take place there, and to actually try to reverse the negative excess imports over exports taking place, so that now they can have agri-products throughout the region and also into Miami. So I was very heartened about that. And I would like to see also the CDB assist the agri-producers wishing to upscale and modernize their operations and obtain GFSI certification. And that will be critical for partnering with them. Thank you.
Thank you. Pierre, as the saying goes, the first shall be last and the last shall be first. Now you opened and now you closed. What's one quick win, a low-hanging fruit to improve logistics and trade in the agri-food?
I think one of my key messages from the beginning is the need for coordination, collaboration, looking at trade, not by small bits and pieces, but looking at a sector as a whole, where every parcel plays its role to ensure efficiency. And on this larger front, there is no quick win. There is long, hard, continuous hard work to bring government closer together, business closer to the government, coordinate between public and private at national and regional level. However, because I'm prompted to talk about one quick win, I think with the right support and with the right political will, digitalization is something that can be achieved. And we have seen the hard way, I would say, with COVID, how fast we've been able to transition from paper-based to digitalization. And we heard this from Erica. So let's not wait for the next pandemic and continue on this momentum to digitalize trade so that logistics service providers can integrate their service more deeply, and to make sure that all the government services, customs, standards can be delivered to traders and consumers as fast as possible. So my quick win: simplify your formalities and digitalize.
Thank you very much. And thank you for those compelling suggestions, everyone. As we close out today, I just want to say that the discussions were very interesting. Through the discussions, we saw there's a need for greater collaboration among agencies in order to address logistical challenges. This includes closer collaboration with government in various agencies. We also saw that trade reforms can only happen through private-public dialogue, and all reforms can only be implemented in partnership with private sector through institutionalized constant dialogue. Today was well spent and very interesting as we saw and heard from experts in their own fields. Thank you very much for everyone joining, and I hope that the discussions we can see how we can achieve the Vision 25 by 2025. Thank you, everyone, and I hope to see you again on Friday.
Thank you.
Thank you.